Good morning. So, imagine with me that there's been a zombie apocalypse. Now, I don't know about you, but if I have to rely on my own individual skills, I am going to be out of luck. I'm not going to survive very long. But I look around this room and I see gardeners and electrical engineers and doctors and people who know self-defense. We have people who are sharpshooters, people who are amazing cooks, people who know how to knit, weave, and sew, experts in soil science and biology, forestry and zoology, and I could keep going, but you get my point. Together, we bring more to the table than any one of us possibly could. Now, I don't actually anticipate a zombie apocalypse. However, I do believe that we're heading into a time where we're going to see major shifts and losses as a result of climate change. And we need to be resilient if we're going to weather, and we will be much more resilient if we're able to weather them together. So another gift that we get from looking at resilience in a collective or community framework is that there's more space for us to rest when we need to. And I actually have the opportunity to demonstrate this particular aspect for you this morning because on Tuesday I caught a stomach virus. And at first I kind of panicked a little. I've certainly prepared worship while sick before and led worship while sick before, but it's not my favorite thing to do, and I'm scheduled to fly out to Phoenix on Monday. So, but then I thought about it, and I thought, what a perfect opportunity. We get to model collective resilience. The minister's down for the count. I sent an email to 5 or 6 people. 3 of them were able to step up and put a few words together, and their thoughts I've reviewed are just perfect for what we need to hear today. So thank you, huge thanks to Mac and to Tina and to Rachel for stepping up so beautifully last minute. And thanks to all of you for being the kind of loving community where I know whatever happens, there's going to be someone who'll have my back.
Okay, so climate change is pretty darn depressing, really bad news, and getting worse. As I wrote this, I had 10 to 15 tabs open on my computer. Trying to keep up with Nils Peterson's extremely informative posts could be a full-time job. Victory Gardens for the climate? What about Bears Ears National Monument? Oh, yep, a piece of Antarctica the size of Malta just calved off into the ocean, and Switzerland is making the most of melting glaciers. The coronavirus, how to avoid despair. And most appropriately, how climate experts think about raising children who will inherit a planet in crisis. Yes, we're in a climate emergency, and yes, we should be thinking about that and taking actions every day. Do I do enough? Nope. My thinking falls into 2 categories, plus an extra little one. Number 1 category is do more. In recent years, it has become especially obvious that our national leaders are doing nothing on the climate catastrophe front. So for now, it's up to us. And because things are so bad, there are so many chances to help. Get involved in something. As the world's top 1%ers, we, even us environmentalists, are also the biggest emitters and can make the biggest difference. Take action, keep moving, and keep fighting. Also, anything I and we do may actually help. I remain hopeful that the bits we do now could help in making things not as bad as they could be. And science, by the way, has backed that up, as long as you don't think too much about positive feedbacks and tipping points. The aim is to limit future warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to keep impacts to a minimum. Also, doing any bit, bigger or smaller, makes me feel better, whether it helps or not. I feel good when I collect signatures or knock on doors to get out the vote. I feel good when I talk to legislators or even when I talk to legislative staff and feel like perhaps I'm making a difference for some young intern. I feel great when I get a young person to register to vote, and most of all, I feel unbridled joy when I hike up from Rose Hours with a backpack full of groceries instead of using the car. Every day we can ask, can I do more? What can I do? Number 2 category is to do less. I am trying to fly less, buy less, drive less. Instead, spend time in my community, play music with friends, spend more time reading, use less, use less. That goes for activism too. When you get tired and discouraged, it's okay to take a rest. Here's a little analogy from singing. So sometimes a choir likes to hold out a note for an endless length of time, a lot longer than a person would be able to hold that note on their own. The little trick that choirs use is that people individually drop out for a second, take a breath, and jump back in. It's the same with making positive change. To be successful, one needs to work together, take turns at catching a breath, and then join back in. Most important is to keep singing. My last bit, as we deal with a frightening world, is to be grateful. It's so good for us, like a vitamin for the soul. Dance and sing more, enjoy hilarious jokes, look at our Palouse hills. A bike ride home from work in the evening light that makes me so tired, drinking coffee with my friends, and jog if you're lucky enough to be able to do it. All the things that we know are important are what's really important. All we have is this moment to love each other, and maybe that's how we'll bring about change.
In 1996, I had a dream, and that dream really changed me. I get emotional when I even think about this dream now. In that dream, it was maybe about dying, or maybe going to another world, or maybe going to heaven and then coming back. And I'll get a little. I'll do this now. That's fine. Yeah. But it was not about technology. But I'll try to aim this way. But in that dream, I was hanging out with a couple of friends, and we realized that we had somehow come to this place where there were people around us who were really relaxed and they were really comfortable. There was water flowing, and it was absolutely beautiful in this place. And these people were relaxed, they were contented, they were understanding. There was no fear, there was no strife, there was no pain. There was no competition, there was no anger, and there was no egotistical force. And it felt wonderful. The dream was just amazing. And people could talk to and learn from each other. And they could reach complete contentment. They could reach complete understanding. They could reach complete peace and complete compassion. Contentment, understanding, peace, and compassion, those words really stuck with me. But then we realized that we weren't ready for this place yet. And it felt kind of embarrassing. It was like I'd walked into a class and sat down, a lecture started, and I thought, this is the wrong class. I've got to get up and I have to leave. And I looked down, and all I had on was my underpants. And it felt that embarrassing. And so we looked around. It was this wonderful place, and we could see this other world, and we went back to it. And it was this truly amazing, messed up world that we live in. And it was beautiful. And we were so happy to be back, even though there are a huge number of problems in this world. And we realized that that's the world for us now. But we had the good fortune to see a little of what another existence is like. And I've held that with me all this time. It's been a big leap in allowing me to remember what the basic requirements are for a stable existence. And I go back to those when I meditate, when I think. Understanding, contentment, peace, and compassion. And I just bring it down to just those four things. And it seems to help me tremendously. When I've got my head on straight, I understand those things aren't necessarily obtainable in this life at all. But this life is a great place to work on going in those directions, and that's what I try to do. But now climate change, it's an enormous problem, just like Tina was just talking about. How do we be those best people we can be that I was just talking about, and still adapt to the future when we don't even know what that future is going to be like? We have very little idea. And I wonder, is this enough? And that brings me to another short story that I'll try to make very short. It's great if we can work toward those things, and it helps me to work toward those things. But I think about right now, the last 2 weeks, Janice has gone to South Sudan. She'll be gone another week. And when she's gone, I just go down. I really get black. Everything looks black. And I just get to where I can't function. And then I go out, and I know I need to do this. I go out and I start talking to people, and I start interacting with them. And man, I just come back. And people do that. We all do that. We all need each other. We're social creatures. We get this amazing resilience out of that. So we need that resilience of working together. I think that's true of all of us. And I think if each one of us finds the things that we're passionate about, that feeds our souls, then we're going to be going many different directions as a community, just like Tina was talking about. But that's exactly what we need. We need loads of different approaches. We need specialization. Some solutions for best routes require just a few people working together. It's good to work as a small group. Some require lots of people coming together, and they require us to come together with people who have such different views that we may find some of their views absolutely abhorrent. But if we look for common needs, what we all have in common, we can find that, and we can make big change happen. I try to keep a positive look on things. So I do this work with Citizens Climate Lobby. And there are surprising communities doing things. I'm just going to give you a few examples. Just this week, some of the largest companies in the world announced that they're divesting from investment in the Alberta tar sands project. Did you think that would ever happen? No. You know, there'll be other money come in, but it's showing. This money is going that direction. BlackRock Investing, the largest investing firm in the world, just joined a group of other investment firms who are pushing, as a group, companies to figure out ways to be more sustainable and reduce their carbon footprints. These investing firms represent $42 trillion. That's twice the GDP of the entire U.S. for a year. That's big money that's pushing for climate change. I thought that just wouldn't happen. Do we need more? Of course we do, but things are happening. A year ago, Republican legislators were very dismissive of climate change, but right now, the Republican leadership has announced that there are 12 climate bills they want to get passed in this next year. Some of them are smoke and mirrors, some of them address CFCs. It's a step. It's not enough, but it's a big step that's happening. With Citizens Climate Lobby, that I spent a lot of time with. The first bipartisan climate bill that's a carbon tax is now in the House. We got that in. And we got that by working with both Republican and Democratic legislators for 10 years so that they wrote the bill and we would go between them. I didn't even know a lot of this was going on, just learned about this recently. The polls are shifting. Only 10%, well, there's so many people who don't believe in climate change. Only 10% of people in America are now dismissive of climate change. It's down to 10%. I'm, of course, looking at the positive things here. There's plenty of negative to look at. But if you consider Republicans under the age of 40, 75% of them think that we need to have a carbon tax with dividends going back to people. So those are huge shifts, and they suggest that people are working together more and more. I've learned a lot of other things being part of this work. I've learned to listen with people whom I don't agree with and still find something I can respect about them. I'm learning to consider the possibility of truth in some of the things they're saying, and really importantly, to think about the possibility that there are errors in the way that I'm thinking. I've learned to focus more on our common needs. And focusing and practicing. How many of you ever played a musical instrument or practiced a sport? How many of you? I mean, almost everybody. Did it help when you practiced? Did you get better at it? Yeah. Your mind's pretty amazing. If you actively practice working to understand things, to truly understand them, your mind gets better at those things. If you work at noticing sources of happiness in your life, and you actively identify those, you say, oh yeah, that made me contented today. Maybe I should think about that a little bit more. If you think about that, you'll be happier each day. And if you do that, your mind's plastic. You start using those routes. You change your brain with practice and you start going new directions. It can change your attitude completely if you just practice those things. In Elizabeth's last sermon of 2019, one thing she did was ask us to write something on a piece of paper for the new year for us to go toward. I wrote down acceptance. And not the kind of acceptance to like, this is so, I have to give up on these things. But the kind of acceptance that's, I understand, okay, so I have to adjust. I'm going to adjust. And it's about adjustment. I realized it's about that. It's about working toward peace, contentment, and understanding. And joy along the way. Knowing that that dream I had is just about a perfect world. And we're not in that perfect world. We're working toward it. And maybe I can only understand the things that I'm really close to that are right around me. And yet we're trying to understand things that are going to happen 40 years down the road and that we can't predict. But we're all working toward those things. And with that understanding, I think we can adjust our expectations. And I think that we can be more resilient. Thank you.
When Elizabeth asked if I could help speak about collective resilience, my first response was gratitude. Gratitude for this community, and for her, and for all the ways this tapestry of bonds weaves beauty, stability, and harmony here on the Palouse. My second response was getting hit by a big memory. The last time I spoke beneath these beautiful paintings of our home was in September 2006. I'd been asked to give a sermon to remember the 5-year anniversary of September 11th. We somehow managed to read a beautiful book to the kids called The Man Who Walked Between the Towers. I talked about a newly proposed institution called the United States Department of Peace. Marshall Rosenberg's powerful work in nonviolent communication, or NVC, was just starting to hit the mainstream. And I shared some of what I'd learned in my trainings with Veronica Lassen, a beloved member of this church, a teacher of NVC, and a dear friend who also helped bring my second son into the world. Near the end of that sermon, I stood up here and shared a story about an African community who, when a person commits a crime or a moral act that harms another, the group puts that person in the center of their circle of community and sings their own special, unique song to them until they remember who they really are. Then, I suggested we all do our best to love George Bush, while also holding him accountable. And yes, there was grumbling and laughter. To close, we sang John Lennon's Imagine and changed the word someday to today. Now all this seems a little bit precious. We have had so many more losses since then, too many of them marked inside this sanctuary. Others escalating in a rising national and international tide of climate chaos, gun violence, authoritarianism, and ecological collapse. This, along with things that are happening to our democracy and our brothers and sisters, that most of us would never have believed could come to pass between then, Obama, and now. And yet they have. It is a different time. Whether we could see it coming or not, from then until now, it almost feels like we've survived a vast global initiation, a rite of planetary and human passage marked by fires of change so extreme and out of bounds that we don't even have words for it yet. Yesterday, Damien Cave published a piece in the New York Times called The End of Australia as We Know It. He wrote, "Since the fire started, tens of millions of acres have been incinerated in areas that are deeply connected to the national psyche. If you're American, imagine Cape Cod, Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the Sierra Nevadas, and California's Pacific Coast all rolled into one and burned." We all recall the smoke of our own unprecedented Pacific Northwest wildfires. We all are realizing these times are not only coming, they are here. And that how we respond will determine not only our own immediate future, but that of people near and far, our kids and grandkids, and the Earth's capacity for life as we know it. Those words aren't hyperbole anymore. I wish they were. Those words are why we all know the name Greta. So, initiated to what? death, devastation, and loss. That is part of our journey, but with it, a birth. These ferocious labor pains are also a rush order on love, but I don't mean the old Hallmark Valentine's Day card kind of love. I'm talking about the deepest, most mystical, and life-changing experiences of unity. Before, I spent 20 years as a science writer, feeling increasingly helpless as I reported on climate and ecosystem collapse. I was trained as a biologist, and I learned the physics of unity. It is literally, mechanically, and absolutely true what Carl Sagan said. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. We are star stuff which has taken destiny into its own hands. The other day, new research came out that spiders and their webs are interlocking pieces of spider mind. Spiders' webs are instrumental to their decision-making and understanding of the world around them. Without their webs, they are less whole. This is called extended cognition, and we are among the species on this planet that use it. Our initiation is igniting our access to our webs of interconnection and to the web of life itself. Our initiation is forcing all of our hands. It's moving us from a consciousness of separation to one of unity so fast we don't have words for what's happening. Humans have long known that we are inspired to action through spontaneous insight, meditation, play, music, dance, joy, community gatherings, and prayer. The synchronicities of our collective responses to our time are not coincidences. They are access points to unity and our interconnection with all that is. Now back to Africa. That tradition I described here all those years ago, where people gather in a circle around wrongdoers to sing them the true music of their soul, so as to remind them of who they really are, that is part of a sacred African tradition known as Ubuntu. Some believe it is among Africa's most precious spiritual heritage. Our initiation is teaching us Ubuntu, which says basically, I am who I am because of who we all are. We are all one. Not only are we not alone, we are all one. In these times, we are coming to know our communities are strong because of our voices together. If you feel the fatigue, the despair, the overwhelm of the intense negativity, take a long, deep breath. As Michael Moore and Tina said a minute ago, the rest of the chorus will sing, the rest of the band will play, then rejoin so others can breathe. Together we can sustain a very long, beautiful song for a very, very long time. You don't have to do it all, but you must add your voice to the song.